and welcome to my watercolor painting class. And today we're painting a busy market in Florence. I've taken a photograph a couple of years ago, a lovely busy square with some marquees there, early spring, so people were still wearing loads of coats and jackets. And I also got my watercolor, my interpretation of it, so to give us an idea of what we could be doing with it. And I'd love us to, on top of our washes and looking at for the architectural elements, but simplified elements, I'd like us to practice bringing people into our painting. Now I've got a group of I think it's girls, group of teenagers sitting right close to on the steps of the church where I'm standing here as well. And we've got loads of people going and exploring the market and seeing Florence. So how do we do that? I've got an A3 piece of paper today. So we can focus on some explorative mark making and explore our colors for the washes. But we also will be looking what will remain light, let's say our umbrellas or some of our buildings, and how the darks as figures and as shadows could be painted together. Okay. So we're not interested in painting individual people, but more as groups of people. Right, so I'm going to start with a sketch, a quick layout of our square before we get to our washes. So if I plan where my buildings are going to start right at the back, perhaps it's harder to judge exactly where they are, where the market is finishing. Approximately somewhere here, somewhere in between all these people coming in, we can see a little diagonal of the base of the right-hand side buildings here. So it just gives me an idea of an approximate place where it's going to be. So using a lighter line might be easier for us to get started. It's also, I think on my photograph, I just narrowed the picture down a little bit. So proportion of the ground in comparison to proportion of the buildings or what's above that ground. Yeah, that's probably at least half of the space. So that might be a bit too much. So if I were to divide my paper into 3, that might be a good suggestion for my square opening here. Right, just gonna double check my line is not straight. Okay, and that line is not going to be quite there. It's going to be disappearing under the all sorts of other things, right? So it just gives us one direction of development. Right, next one. We've got the darker buildings, the buildings in the shadow here on the right. If I were to plan where that, right, you can't quite see there. If I plan it somewhere against the width of my picture, it's less than halfway through, yeah? So it's about, again, it's going to be a third, maybe a little bit more than a third. Maybe somewhere here. That's my third. And let's have a look. Yeah, maybe a little bit more than a third here. Okay. And if I plan, again, big shapes first, the base of the roofs of these buildings, I want to leave kind of, if you look for that rectangle, elongated rectangle left of space, we can put all the rooftops after, we can put all the spaces, playful edges later on. And then we can plan overall perspective for our buildings here on the right. perhaps a gentle slant to show the square is opening up towards us. Again, that line is going to be disappearing once we'll put the people. But we need it for light, and we'll need it for helping us out with the windows later on as well. And what's going to happen here, our perspectives now will start, yeah, the lines will start getting for the windows getting straighter somewhere here, and then the higher we're going to go, it's going to start changing and going a little bit higher. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to draw my approximately somewhere here a straightish line as a guidance for my windows directions. As a guidance for my windows directions. Yes, I'm almost making like a quick grid of possible shapes. I'm gonna make maybe the top one a little bit darker so you can see better. And then any more other shapes, I will have loads of tops of the windows, some canopies for some of the higher building tops. They're all slightly developing that way. I'm not interested in exactly where they are yet. Okay. More of the directions. Okay. And these gentle lines, again, just keeping them pale. I've done them approximately similar widths, but there could be smaller and shorter distances because the windows will vary. So these are just guide, almost guide-like net. Now, next one, I want to plan my market umbrellas. Okay. Now, I have slightly exaggerated their size on my painting here. So making them slightly bigger might be a bit more exciting. And where do we place them? That's why we needed that base for our line here. Where the umbrella is going to go. So they need to go a little bit above, and I'm drawing the line for the lower part of the umbrellas, for the base of the umbrellas. Okay, I'm going to go over the lighter buildings here as well. And I'm going to just put a couple of triangles, quite a shallow triangles. I'll do one on the right, so one on the left and one on the right as the starting points. Okay, maybe a similar symmetry shapes. Okay. And then the other ones will come in just as parallel lines. Okay. You can do as many as you want or as little as you want. I think sometimes simplifying the shape is better. I'm gonna make them a little bit darker here so you can see. If you can keep your lines as light as possible, then when you do your whites, preserve your whites, that will be easier for us to see that fresh white without any extra pencil marks. Just gonna make my triangle a bit more equal. Okay. Maybe another triangle behind my left-hand side one. There are some canopies of the markets stalls going down. I quite like the idea that we can see through them, the more old-fashioned market. So I'm just going to leave them open here. But there is a little bit of wider, stretched out canopies as well, and they will give us some lovely shadows of pale blue. So I'm just going to add almost like a rectangle addition, little flat box. If you can see it. If not, just triangles will be fine as well. It just gives me a little bit of a planning of light, perhaps. Maybe one or two of them. Okay. So nice and simplified drawing there. And then I'll need to plan my figures at the front. At any point, if you start struggling and start being a bit too complex to draw the bigger figures at the front, just leave them out and just proceed with smaller shapes of people at the back as well. That will be absolutely fine, so don't panic. But the reason I've done the buildings and the umbrellas first is I wanted to make sure that I can see how much space is left for my figures, okay, for my figures at the front. So I'm going to find a little step where they're sitting. I need enough space left so I can put some shadows from them. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little bit of a plan. Okay, that's my line where they might be sitting. And then perhaps right, the line for the back of the buildings is going to be the back of the building where the people are going to stand. It's probably going to be much closer to us. So if I'll just give myself maybe a dotted line to give myself an idea where the darkness will be coming in, okay? So I'm extending that, so I'm planning that ahead. So what I wanted to do, I want to have the heads of these larger figures probably just above those lines. So if I were to put, okay, one person, maybe they're sitting really close together, another, maybe a gap between the next one. Maybe another one got another smaller gap somewhere there. So I've got almost blocks of shapes first. Okay. Planning the heads will be quite small. Might just do little upside down U's. Yeah, upside down U's. We can just move them about. Don't have to be in the middle of those shapes. By the time we start doing the strokes for the heads, they might become a little bit bigger, but always better to do it smaller and make them larger if we need to, very easy in comparison to shrinking them. So I've done big shapes. I can then soften the curves, got the bottoms. Okay, might be the legs. Okay, might be some of them might be the arms. Yeah, might be leaning on the arms. It might be a backpack or something dark. Might be a hood. Yeah, let's do a back here, bag. Perhaps again, it's how much or how little you want to work with. Maybe another bag somewhere on the side. Just a rhythm of shapes, and then making it a little bit more personal. Okay, this person is leaning down, so can I move this head a little bit lower? Okay, so she's suddenly leaning over. This person is looking over, talking. Okay. Okay, what happens here? I've got like a jacket over, hoodie. Again, by the time the Person who's turning the head becomes slightly bigger. Shoulders maybe a bit softer, just cutting into them. Okay. And then I can remove some of the supportive lines, some of the extra corners. All right, my last person is just, maybe even the head is teenagers sitting down. Yeah, the heads are lower down, probably on their phones. Or looking at the maps, exploring where they're going to be going after. Yeah, where's their favorite pizzeria is. So overlapping. So they're just becoming more interesting figures. I just drop this arm a little lower. Okay, so I'm not overly interested in the details, but I'm interested in the volumes of people. Yeah. So that's will be good. I've got two heads coming up here on the side, but they look a little bit odd. They're quite steep steps, so I think I might just leave it out. If they might be sitting somewhere on a shallower step, I think the focus on the people will be walking people will be even better. Right, I might just do a shadow direction from this group to kind of remember that that's going to take a little bit of space, so it's not going to be empty. Okay. And I'm ready to finish my buildings. The people were key for me today. Okay, buildings. Let's have a look what we've got. Right, so at the back, we've got two lovely buildings. We can see one quite a narrow part. We've got a gap between two buildings and another one. Don't worry about proportions of them. Don't worry about number of windows. Today, I'm interested in the light, dark atmosphere. I'm interested in setting the view for background view for my street, for my market. So I'm going to plan my rooftops as a gentle angle here, and then it's going straight. Okay, I've got another angle here. We can see a little extension at the top, classic extra development on the roof. You can see a beautiful tower in the distance. If you spot any other rooftops, chimneys, if you want to add something of your own, there's another tower somewhere here. Just playful background. I'm going to leave the windows out completely. I'm just gonna, because they're gonna stay flat for us. I'm gonna leave that one out. Something in between the buildings. We might put another, maybe another roof, or another kind of, the street is going away from us. The lovely quirky borders of the street, lovely twisty labyrinth of Florence. Okay. And on this side of the street, we'll need to find some vertical lines. And then attach everything else we've got there to those vertical lines. So for example, I have, again, there are loads of buildings. Some of them just we see in the front and we see the edge. For some of them, just the front. So there isn't any borders. We've got a little street going in there. I think we can see part of the edge of the building, but there is a like a balcony in between. But I don't want you to count them. I want you to have the impression that there is something there, but it's not too precise. So for example, at the far end on this side, I can see a narrower part of the building, okay? So I'll just put a vertical line. You can see a light changing. Can I put a group of buildings together? So a few more vertical lines. Okay, I can see a slightly darker shape. Can I make that one? And so I'm looking for rhythm of these vertical lines. There's something wider, something very narrow. Again, wider or a group of lines, something again a bit more narrower. Something a bit more lighter, something again more, maybe it will disappear in there. Okay. So playful rhythm. I'm just going to double check that I've got vertical lines here. And again, by the time we'll do our washers, it will be quite light and soft. So those borders of the lines will be disappearing. So we need our vertical lines just to add some of the, again, tops of the roofs. Okay, one roof is there. Okay. Another one's going to start maybe a bit higher. Okay, maybe another one again slightly higher. They could have slightly different gaps. Yeah, as long as they're different, it doesn't matter if one is shorter than the other. Just want that variation. Okay. Maybe that will stop here. And then we can find some other overhanging sections of the roofs. Okay. Maybe this one will continue somewhere here. So planned grid of perspective is now serving us a good guide, as a good guide of where we want to add things. So for example, close to me, I can plan some of the windows. I've got my guide grid, and that might become my idea of possible windows directions. Okay. Again, what I don't want all our windows to be all in one line. I want them a little bit up, a little bit down, a little bit down, a little bit up. So with the use of pencil, we can do that before our painting. Okay, I'm just going to clean all these lines. It's going to be a turn for me here. Some of the windows somewhere here. I'll do a couple of rows just to double check they are different. So for example, I had my line here. If I drop it a little bit lower and then plan some of the windows above it, it just gives me that variety. That's what I was talking about. So they're not all starting from the same. Okay, this slightly wrong width for my windows. Put them put the tops in the wrong places. Okay. Well, these ones could be a bit smaller. The rest I can do with my brush. Right, any of the lower ones. Again, if that's on that line, can I drop anything lower and start any windows below? Can I do something mid-range? Okay, that's all right. I can do some on the line. Okay, as little lines will be plenty. Okay. It's going to be a gap between my buildings. But by the time we put all the people in, we're not going to probably see any of this anyway. And the lower part. So I'll turn that line away. And double check on the straightness of my vertical lines. Okay. You want to make any grand doors, or not so much grand doors, but something bigger entrances. There might be something close to us, a little bit more over shop windows, shops. We'll just offset it a little further back. Might have one building a bit more close to us, the other one's a bit more set back. Okay, this looks better. And the people themselves, I'm not going to draw. I'm going to leave the space as it is and develop the mark making separately. If you wanted to add anything else to the rooftops, if you wanted to have anything else playful, I think that's just overhanging a little bit. Need to be with my line at least here. Okay. I'm happy with that. Just need to make sure that I can rub out any lines we don't want. So for example, any lines going over our white umbrellas, behind, any double lines or loads of lines where you might have been sketching. Just trying to keep things simple. Okay. Any sketchy lines for my group of people here? I think that will be all fine by the time we start painting them as well. Okay. Put this building tiny bit back as well. Will give me more space for the crowd to work its way to the market. Okay, I'm happy with that. Right, well, I'd like us to start first, our simple washes is our sky. Okay, so that will be quite a quick wash. Our umbrellas, before we forget that we need to leave white, we can paint a little bit of shadows on them. And I'd love us to paint then the square, the light, which will be kind of on the square. So we'll do the most lighter washes and then we'll come back to the buildings. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to test some of my colors and then I'm going to apply them on my painting straight away. Double check something, a bit of tape gone over my picture here. Right, so I'm going to start with azure or cobalt blue. Let's find my cobalt blue here. Okay, so if I dilute it on my palette, they will come up quite pale. Now, if you're painting on A3 paper or smaller, you can straight away apply the wash. If you're painting on a larger paper, we can use the wash brush, applying some water and then applying our pale blue. I'm going to go over my buildings straight away. Okay, just going to make sure I've got enough liquid. Okay, over my buildings. And I'm going to stop just maybe a centimeter into my buildings here. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush, dry my brush, and I'm going to soften that pale blue. Okay, and if my blue appears to be quite pale, I can then, only then, add a little more darkness. So that's almost like your lighter wash or watery wash. And you can just add a tiny hint of extra blue there, just to have that not overly wet, white area. And anything runny, I can soften the bottom. Nice and easy. Okay, if you prefer to do a wet application of paint first and then let the color to put the color in, that's fine as well. Just make sure you've got dark enough color to go over the diluted areas. Over diluted, painted with water areas, just making these borders tiny bit paler. This means that I don't want the blue here, I just wanted a soft transition. Okay. And I can use the same blue, same pale blue, painting over some of my umbrellas. I'm going to start maybe with one of my main umbrellas here by leaving some white on the left and right hand side. The more white you leave, the better, because we can always shrink it. Okay. And then in between my umbrellas, I'm just going to put a little block of light, block of blue, leaving a little bit of white on top of each umbrella here. So something here, a little rhythm. It's harder to see because my water is reflecting, but it will settle in now into my blocks here. Just a little bit of that pale blue, leaving some white in. Okay, maybe a little larger even, maybe then just do a little playfulness of how much white is left. Okay, and again, a little more blue on one side and maybe a little block left. Because we have white areas everywhere else, it's harder for us to see that bold white of our market umbrellas. By the time we let the darknesses from the buildings, it will be just lovely to see. So keep it pale, don't make them too dark. We want them to appear white eventually. So that will be good if we can add them now. Okay. Don't overdo it. Just a little bit of color. I try to make that rhythm of strokes on umbrellas slightly different. One is a bit wider, one is a bit narrow, one is a bit more, it's a gap in between, one is a bit more broken. So yes, they're in a perfect row, but they're still more, occasionally might be turned a little, maybe distance in between is slightly different. So that natural variety is important. Okay. And for the lower part of my painting, I'm going to go for some ochre. Okay, double check that you have cleaned your brush. Hasn't got any blue there. Okay, so I've got some ochre, that's a bit more warmer one. And a little bit of orange. Okay, or golden. But I'm not going to use it so strong. I'm going to dilute it. Okay, I'm going to use a bit of both, a bit of ochre and a bit of this orange color. Okay. And my building here is going to have a lot of warm colors, quite a lot of bold colors. So probably next to it, I'm going to use a little bit of ochre. Okay, maybe even I'm just looking at my photograph even more. Maybe a tiny bit of cadmium red as well. So that's my cadmium red, and if I mix it with some ochre, it will be just like a bleak pink, yeah, mixed with ochre. Just got a little bit of, hasn't got that heat from my orange or from any other reds. It's just very bleak, warm color. So then when I'm painting my buildings, they will be much more stronger in light, and the pavement, the square will have much more bleached, much more lighter area. Now here, because it's much larger surface, I'm going to apply some water. So the plan is to put my pink and ochre together next to the building, and maybe diluted orange somewhere close to this corner. I'm going to paint over the people. I'm going to paint a little bit under the umbrellas. So all surface will come together here. So from under the buildings, over the people here. And if you want to work with your big wash brush, you can do that as well straight away. So I'm going to go for some ochre, some cadmium red. Going to make sure I dilute it. Diluting it enough to see the color. That's quite pale. That's probably the color I want. But if I'm applying it on top of the watery surface, I need to make sure it's slightly stronger. Otherwise, that water is going to be absorbed and we're not going to see anything there. Okay, so very quick wash there, and a little bit of that orangey color in this corner. And then any of the water just to make sure everything is connected together here. Okay. Softening the borderline with the buildings will be really good as well. We will be putting a wash over the buildings. I wanted to merge as well. So if we can do that, that'll be fantastic. That will appear quite pale, all of this. By the time it will dry, it looks dark against a lot of white, but it will be pale when it dries. Just collecting a little bit of extra water off my masking tape so it doesn't settle in the borderline. So if you have your board under the angle, it will collect the water very quickly for you. It will give you a nice and even wash. Just checking how it's drying. And I had another little darkness here, just drying very quickly. I think that should be enough. And then we can focus on the colors for our buildings. As our washes are drying, let's just explore some color we can use for our buildings. Now for the back, on my photograph, all I can see is just something dark brown, maybe a little hint of blue. So I wanted to have a bit more personal interpretation. So I ended up with some lovely ultramarine and cadmium red mixed together into different variations. So if I were to put my ultramarine out on my paper, okay. And then if I were to get my cadmium red is the one which is a little bit more close to orange red. Okay. And mix them together. We can have variations of not quite pure red and then not quite pure blue, but they become quite exciting ranges. And then we can add color to them. So let's say if I pre-mix not quite a fresh blue, that cadmium red with that blue, and then I go direct fresh blue, I can see how it enhances that blue. And then if I were to bring a little bit more red to it as well, not enough red, not a direct fresh one, but just kind of mixing it together. It becomes as a pattern together, yeah, quite coherent merge of one color into another, and that's what I'd like to do with our buildings at the back. I use a small brush just to play with my colors on the palette. I can use a small brush and a larger flat brush at the same time. So the small brush will be good for all the tops or any sharp borders, and the larger brush will be really good for doing all blocks. Because I want us to do it as a wash. It's quite a small area, again, to make it very wet. So if I use a wash brush, for me, everything's going to be too runny. I can do it here on these lighter buildings, on these sunlit buildings. But for this area, I think I'll be more in control if I were to work with just a larger flat brush. If you don't know your washes, you've done them, and you feel you need that extra moisture, please go ahead with it as well. So I'm going to start with just an off clean blue, so I'll mix in some ultramarine and a little bit of cadmium red. Okay, so I can test it again. Okay, something there. Not too light. We want it to be a shadow, so don't go too light. Okay, and what I'm going to start, so pre-mix that color, and I'm going to start with my perhaps a pointy roof. Okay, didn't have enough paint in here. So starting from something at the top and then going and getting the shape, add it all together. Can I do a tower? I've got a tower there. Can I put a little bit more red in it? And do a tower there. Okay, and then perhaps again go with my big cool brush. Okay, and touch a few shapes here together. Tower is merging. Okay, now can I go a bit quicker with a larger wash so the colors are not going to dry? And once they are there, okay, I can start adding other colors on top. So can add more red. Just need a little bit more pigment. Yeah, so my paints on my wash is altogether wet. Gonna have more blue. Okay. Gonna make it all run. Gonna add a little bit more again of the red. And at the lower part of my buildings, all I need to look out for are our umbrellas and meet them. That's another reason I didn't really want to do a plain wash of water, because I want to have more control where that wash is going to stop. Okay. And if you wanted to use a masking fluid for something like this, that will be fine as well. And then you can paint over it through. Okay. As the water collecting in the corners of my umbrellas, that's why leaving extra white is better, because when the paint runs, sometimes we reduce the volume of that white in its appearance. So ideally we want all of that one painted together. Okay. Can I add anything else to it while the wash is wet? I can add maybe slightly more reddish color if you wanted to have perhaps even suggestion on the windows or anything else, maybe some extra suggestion on pressure ultramarine somewhere for the roof, or inside of the street a bit more, perhaps slightly more blue. Okay, just paint it over my umbrella by accident. So for my umbrella where I overpainted it, I'll just let it be and gently lift it if it's well lifted. Not, I'm just gonna have to leave it there. Might be the opposite, quite good. We've got lost sharpness and very fresh sharpness, so lost and found borders. Okay. What's that block there now? That's fine. So just letting it be, we can do all the details after. And while we're in this corner, we can also do a slightly lighter version of this wash for under umbrellas. Okay, and lighter because we will be adding darker figures. So any of that red and blue variation. But most importantly, I'm going to start from underneath of my umbrellas. Okay, not too light, but okay, so I'm going to work down. Maybe just vary that width of that darkness. And make sure that I can see the contrast between the umbrellas and my wash. So I'm putting a colored wash, so that blue and red mixture. And then I can add a stronger blue or lighter red or just a color between those two. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to stretch it further over the heads of the people here, just kind of up to their shoulders approximately. Okay. And then I'm going to clean my brush, dry it, and I'm going to collect this wash and kind of blend it as it will stop. Okay, I'm not interested in perfection. I'm not looking into a perfect line. The line is kind of there, but it's not direct line. If you lost part of your people's sitters' heads, that's all fine. And the border here on the right as well from under the umbrella, because we're going to merge it with the buildings. If you lost sharpness of the people's heads, that's not a problem at all. The opposite. It will be quite easy to gain back. So we created some darkness, but perhaps not as dark as our buildings yet. Okay. Might put a little bit of the shadow. It does dry quite light, so if I can see a very much darkness of the street at the back, I might just put a little block. Okay, I don't want it to stop on my person's head. In the center of it. That's what the playful stuff we'll start adding later. That blend with the street, with the markets square was important. The extra little nuances I'm adding now are less important, could be edited later. Just gonna make them slightly varied. Okay. That depth is a bit better. So there is loads of light, but there's some darkness coming in there as well. Okay. For the rest of our buildings, let's pick up a range of colors here. Now, to connect them to some of the buildings inside there, we can always start with our cadmium red. Okay, so I've got my cadmium red out. And then I think if we were to use the orange and ochre and that will be brilliant as well. So orange or golden in St. Petersburg White Nights. I think it's a little bit more into the yellow in comparison to the cadmium orange. So you can add a little bit more yellow or just ochre, and it will start mixing well together. So those are my pure colors. And when I start painting, I want to merge them like we did with previous wash. So my red is not going to be as intense, but it will be maybe a bit more diluted. My ochre and orange could be quite pale as well, as intense. So we can just work into that a little bit more. Because my buildings are taking more, probably a third of my painting, I will put a wash with a clean water first. So my wash brush, and I'll make all of this corner wet. Need to be a little bit more careful next to the umbrella. So what I might do, I might just wet everything and leave a little bit of space here. So it's not going to run. You can't come close to the umbrellas if you feel you can do more accurately. I tend to leave a little bit out so then I have more control with the color and come close on the when I have my color on the brush. So quick wash. Okay, and then you can reduce the size of your brush, or you can even go for painting the same with the same brush. I think I'm gonna go with the same brush. I'm gonna make my main color maybe the orange, and if I were to introduce it quite boldly, don't forget that we're painting on a wet surface, and it means that it will dry paler. Okay, so I'm just charging in with this orange. Okay, quite boldly. Can I add more cadmium red, but a little bit more diluted. Okay, maybe for this in between the two buildings here, I can see that gap, a bit more darker. Can I paint it elsewhere? Just as a more diluted version and let the paint run. Maybe somewhere close to the base of the buildings. Okay. I can see my paint is drying and it's becoming paler. So can I add any more? Let's say ochre and orange and ochre and crimson. Sorry, ochre and cadmium red. Okay, just diluting it gently so it's not staying too plain. And then perhaps for the rest of the areas, more diluted ochre, or just stretching some of that color over, and then I can come close to my umbrellas and paint just a little more carefully for the borders. I can paint also this color slightly under my umbrellas here on the right hand side space. Okay. And before I take it off on the square, I want just to see any other darknesses. I think as my paint is gently drying, I can see where I can enhance some of that contrast, be a bit more bold with the color. Okay, that will be quite playful. And I want to dilute this color when I come to the market square, the pavement. Yeah, just want to use that big brush and just it merges, it blends, it becomes quite similar. That's all fine. Okay. Again, if any colors are too bold or a little too pale, kind of pale and less pale combinations is good. We don't want them to be all of a similar nature. It's that variety we want. And I might actually add a little bit more of that color here as well on the front. Now I can see how it will work together. So our big first wash is finished, and we can add second layers as it starts drying. Right, next, while my warm wash is drying here, I'm going to pick my Chinese brush, or any round brushes or smaller mop brush will be fine as well. Something we can have a pointy end and also hold some water. Now my plan is, before I do anything else to this build, to this side of the building, I can just work on a little bit of details at the back. And most importantly, start adding some patterns with my people as well. Maybe not everywhere, but slowly starting to do it on the gaps and also for my front group of people. Okay, so colors. Can use the same colors we just had before, ultramarine and cadmium red. I can also add a hint of indigo. Okay, so this is my ultramarine and cadmium red. Any variations, more into the blue, more into the red. I'm going to start with perhaps touching up some of the rooftops. Okay, maybe just playful lines. Can add texture. Okay, maybe a little window somewhere here for the tower. Thinner lines, wider lines, maybe little windows. Quite like doing windows with this Chinese brush as well, because it gives you quite playful mark making. So instead of doing all perfect windows, even like that, they're not quite perfect, but gaps are the same, widths are the same. Can you do a little playfulness of suggestive windows? Yeah, it becomes much more exciting. So perhaps I'll go for a tiny bit of indigo, or slightly darker shape of the roof here for me. Often there might be an extra thinner line just to show all the gutters, or the how the light reflecting. Okay, maybe my windows will start appearing, okay, in groups of 2. Maybe there will be taller ones below. Maybe there will be a little bit more red. There might be a lighting or something in there. Yeah, that variety is becoming more exciting. Don't have to be all the same, so the rest might be just stops for me. I might not do anymore. I might just separate the background of this building with the street next to it. Just getting tiny bit more indigo, and this lovely Chinese brush will give me a softer kind of gentle application of paint. It starts more on a point rather than like a flat brush will start on a block, and then I can just perhaps turn that one into a building again at the back, or shape or shadow. Perhaps just soften everything next to my umbrellas and create an extra shadow there. Yeah. And let's have a look at the building and windows. Next, you can make up your own windows. Okay, some suggestions. And the brush gives us some thinner lines, some wider lines, some playfulness. And again, I might just get a slightly darker corner next to one of my umbrellas, and the side wash. So if I've done, let's say, a line, I can then also do a side blend of this with this brush. And that's quite exciting. Just collecting a little bit of runny water here. And that's what I might do with the extra darkness under my umbrellas. I can do some long legs for the umbrellas themselves. Yeah, there's somewhere there. Am I counting them? There's somewhere there. And before I do any people, I want to do the big figures here. Using very similar colors we just had, but maybe a little bit more into the reds. Cadmium red. You can always add more cooler colors after. So perhaps for the heads. Okay. Perhaps. So it's kind of simplifying the colors of the people instead of going for all individual coloring. They're in the shadow. They're a little bit similar. This one's got a pinker bag, so I can add a hint more of the red into that bag. Yeah. The other one's got loads of black and white tones, so I'll just stay mainly with blue and red. So I've got loads of blacks. So if I'll start with paler grays first, and then we'll work with the shadows after. Okay, this one's the other way around. So I'm looking for some paler shapes first, and then darker tones will come perhaps with indigo or ultramarine and indigo. They could come when the colors are dry, or you can work still on the wet surface. Not full strengths of darkness, but just adding a little bit to that light. It's a bit darker here. Little blocks. Bag is all dark together. Okay. Maybe more shadow for this person. And then diluted version of our cadmium red and blue, more into the cadmium red this time, but very diluted, very pale. I'm going to create the shadows straight away while the silhouettes are still damp. They might run, which will be quite nice. So I'm going to connect them together, unite them together, not leaving any white under their bottoms. But you can make it a little bit more streaky, kind of elongated light. So I'll probably come into the late afternoon here. So we see the figures tiny bit more separated from one another. So I've got a runny line, so I'll separate one figure here from another to another groups there. Okay. So it's nice and soft, allows us to work with that softness after. We can add a little bit of sharpness to that as well. Again, the less we fiddle, the better. I'm just simplifying the form. I've got too many little dabs. Just want to simplify shapes a bit more. Okay. So painted the figures and the shadow together. They belong to each other. If my border of the shadow on the pavement is too strong, I think I can see it's just drawing almost like a line, darker line. Maybe because my pencil markers there are quite strong. I'm just going to soften that border so it kind of appears sharper, softer, sharper, softer. I think that will work better for me. So it's a little bit more suggestive rather than too precise. Very good. So it blocks. If you decided to leave these people out, that's absolutely fine as well. And another element I wanted to add, as we're here, using the same cadmium red and very diluted ultramarine. So easier colors when we simplify them. I want to use the same Chinese brush, but mainly the widths of it, to paint some of the kind of shadows on our buildings on the sunlit side of the market. So my tiny bit more of that red and ultramarine. So the second mini wash here and there, I'll add some of that strokes. Doesn't have to be even perfect. The opposite sometimes. The more playful you will be. So I've got quite a wobbly line. I can just soften it gently here. Becomes more within that line, but not overly precise. And I also wanted it for offsetting my crowds. If there will be against very light background buildings, there will be two. You start counting heads and counting how many people are there. If there's light, plus we've got probably a shadow coming across here as well. Yes, that's where it's going to be coming here. That's from tiny bit darker. So that could be on that building a little more of a shadow. Again, it will offset my umbrellas. It will connect the cooler buildings and the warmer buildings together with this cadmium red. Okay. Can have that line a bit more sharper or a bit more softer, the border. Okay. And I wanted that sort of line. Tiny bit more colors. I'm running out again. Somewhere here. As some big washes, some plain build up, and kind of stopping more or less at the base of the building. Doesn't have to be perfect, the opposite. There will be some shadows from our people, which we'll add later on as well, but just kind of breaking it down a bit more playfully will be better. And I can add my windows now to this side. Again, the same red and blue. Oh yeah, if I want to have more shadows from under some of the rooftops, I can do that. Okay. That's when the windows will need to come over when they dry. So let's come back to my textures here. Okay, one roof, another. I'll leave this one out because it's too wet. Can I start working into my building, sorry, into my windows? So some of them I already got my pencil marks on. Okay, some I will draw new ones. Some of them I'll just leave out. Can I slightly change the color as I work? Maybe add a hint of blue so that variety is there. Maybe bring another roof which I haven't drawn. Okay, this one will be good. Little canapes. Maybe paler windows first. Sometimes it's easier to do them lighter. Sometimes I put a little windowsill or something at the top. You can always make the rest of the windows darker. If we can remember to keep them slightly varied in height from the windows next to them. One row of the windows slightly different in height to the other ones. Typical Italian variety. Okay, maybe a big block of windows really close together. Something elongated. Something paler blue. And it might be opening up. Only if you wanted to. Okay, you can decide on patterns if you wanted for the closed to us windows. I just tend to use my brush strokes as playful elements. And as they started to dry, the windows, I'll add a tiny hint of darkness to some of them. Maybe at the tops, maybe for some of the pattern work. Quite suggestive and playful. So I'm increasing the darkness of the windows gently. I don't jump into that huge contrast too quickly. Because the moment you start bringing that extra contrast in, you zoom in into the area and you want to know more information about that area. And if we don't interpret anything else, it feels unfinished and not sure what's it's kind of why we're giving that attention to the area. Okay, I'm just waiting for this area to dry, perhaps a tiny bit more. That might be enough. Okay. Plenty of suggestive shapes, plenty of details. And to work our people out, we'll need again our Chinese brush or mop brush. A smaller mop brush will be lovely. And again, the same two colors, cadmium red and a bit of blue. And if we test it on our paper first, let's play kind of our with the strokes. If I put my paper, practice paper, next to my painting, it will give me kind of a scale of the people I want to paint. So I'm looking for kind of that size. So if I put some strokes, I'm interested in just placing a stroke. I end up maybe with a body and leg or a person's silhouette there, yeah? Maybe with a backpack, or I can add another leg and we've got a person walking, yeah? So if I've got a few of these strokes together, some of them smaller, some of them shorter, some of them more, yeah, so I start having people in a distance and people close to me, especially if I extend the legs. Okay, I'm gonna make the color a little bit darker so you can see it a bit better. Yeah, so I'm just putting a stroke point under the brush and just drag down. Okay, we've got a person in there. Okay, I'm not doing any heads yet, clustering that group of people. Okay, and they're quite light first. So I'm looking at the distance here. Some of the people might be closer to me and can have slightly bigger size strokes. Some of them will be a bit more smaller. Okay. And only once I'm happy with that, I can add some more darker color, perhaps less runny. Extra blue within my painting mix, or a little bit of extra indigo as well. I can repeat the process. It might be painting between those strokes. When the groups are drying, we can add more darker tones, so it's becoming much more exciting, busy market. Now, if we're painting on top of our lighter buildings, those are probably the colors I'll go for first. If I'm painting under the umbrellas, we already have got quite a lot of darker tones, so probably we'll go for even darker colors. So let's start with these groups of colors first. So playful strokes. Try to relax. If you're not too sure, just keep practicing on your spare paper. Okay, I'm not painting heads yet, just the bodies. So perhaps starting a little bit smaller at the back. Okay, maybe grouping people a bit more. Okay. And as I've got a lot of similar colors, maybe I will add more blue here. Okay. We can have more people or less people. You can have a beginning of the market time. You can have more of the open season. So I'm starting to add more legs. Okay. Some of them will have more busy legs. I'm not counting how many people are there. Okay. Might be somebody walking there. Might be standing and chatting. Maybe tourists taking photographs. Okay. Maybe somebody will be much closer to me, so yeah, so the legs a bit more close here. Maybe somebody not gonna show as much of the legs spaces there. Can I do the same under my market, under my umbrella, sorry, for my market, but I'm gonna make the color slightly darker so I can see the bodies slightly closer to me, slightly more further away. Okay, they're there, but they're part of that silhouette, what's under the market. Might even add even darker gaps. Okay, any other shadows for my market here? Okay, I'll just paint this person's head, creating that light on the shoulder and on the shoulders and on the around the head. At the same time, I'll use the same mark making kind of a darkness for silhouettes of other people here. Okay. While these shapes are a little bit wet, I'm going to let them be first. And I'm going to add little heads in the market area. So I'm going to do little dabs. I'm not counting. This person got one head. This one's got this one. This one's... No, I'm going to add it more as spontaneous row. Okay, they're almost going to be in the line or within that approximate line. Yeah, just a bit more busy, a bit more further away. Okay, start having a busy market. If I were to put the heads in the line or just a little bit off that line, that's all good. The moment I start putting heads like this, you're standing further away. So this is two examples. One example, another example. That looks like we're on the street. This one looks like we're standing on the balcony and looking down on everybody. You need much more space and bodies to paint for the crowd. Okay, this is gently drying. Can I add any other? You can even just add dabs. It doesn't have to have attachments to heads because it's more of that space. Okay, can add more darkness in between. Is that a body? Is that a shape? Is that a shadow of the building? Is that something else? Can I add a bit more darkness to under my umbrellas areas? That classic happy dot approach when we put in a little bit of full stops. Maybe I'm going to add a little bit of darkness for my figures sitting down. So that happy dot technique of little dabs and shapes to finalize, kind of ground certain things. I'm just going to soften some of the borders here. Not to taking too much attention. And finally, whatever's left on my brush and whatever left on the runniness of the shapes of the people here, I can just stretch the shadows from under their feet. Ideally a similar direction, otherwise they will start being looking different. And also don't do the same kind of parallel lines, right? If I make it darker, you can see better. Don't make it two perfect parallel lines, kind of merge, so we don't want that. We want something merged together, something thin, something elongate, somewhere else disappearing. So it's that variety we want to happen. Okay, it's okay to have some of the shapes a little bit more transparent. Okay. And if you want to, at that stage, add any more windows close to the area, just to have that connection. That would be good. I'm going to add a tiny bit of pavement markings for the stone work. Again, perhaps a little bit of red and blue, or indigo and a bit of red. I'll just make sure it's more dry. Again, test the darkness of my line. Okay, the Chinese brush will give me some fantastic straightish lines, broken lines, a bit more sharper lines. So where my group of teenagers are sitting, I might have some of that texture of slabs of marble, of steps. Yeah. Maybe we increase the shadow a little bit. Okay. And as a final touch, we can add tiny bit of, just touching up a couple of windows here, they appear slightly paler. I can touch up tiny bit of white. If you have some white acrylic, we can mix it on our paper. I've got tiny bit of acrylic here. Perhaps with a thinner brush, like one of your round brushes. So I'm just going to pick up tiny bit of acrylic on my paper sample here. And just direct white. I can have maybe little shoulders outlined, maybe top of the head for my larger figures. They're just very simple borders. Okay, this one's got enough light, so it doesn't really need it, which is fine. Can I do any white gaps? Like we did happy dots, could there be little happy dots of light in between the figures? Sometimes that's just enough, again, of that playfulness. And then I will add a little bit of paler heads here and there. Again, just to create that variety, so they're not all silhouettes. Some of them will have a little bit more light. So it's more of a creating an atmosphere than painting the exact shapes. And also love the cadmium red mixed with a bit of white. That becomes quite acrylic-like feature, and we can add a hint of that red for some other faces, maybe a tiny bit more intense red. Yeah, it just starts firing up there. its arms, hands, some of the faces here and there. And again, I'm trying to do those dots not in equal proportion to the rest of the dots, but maybe over some, maybe even somebody might be wearing something red, or just that light is coming in. Yeah, it just becomes a little more exciting with the highlights. I think that might have something in there as well to compensate for the volume of red around here. Okay, I'm just touching up any more shadows from the people in the market. I forgot to do their shadows. Yeah, just a little connection of horizontal lines. And I'm happy to stop. So playful, suggestive watercolor with a lot of movement, a lot of simplicity, yeah, air, dynamics. Just spotted this very dark blob and connected to a shadow. That will look even again much better together. So I hope you exploring your figures and shadows. I'm just looking again how things could be even more improved for these umbrellas next to now very dark shadows. That's it. Now I'm definitely stopping. So have a play, have this little discoveries with the whites or with the darks or with the reds, and maybe even can create your own street, just the street of people without anything else. You don't really need to do much, just blocks of warm, cool, dark, light to have that wonderful interpretation. Thank you very much for today. I hope you had fun, and I look forward to seeing your paintings. Thank you.
Thank you very much.